let's say that chapter 9 is very theistic. Krishna becomes permanent. It is now part of the second group of 6 chapters, if we were to divide the Gita in 3 groups. So there would be 6, 12, 18. So the first 6 chapters that we cover at length is mainly, not exclusively, but mainly dealing with acting in the world. What would that look like for a spiritualist? If we want to extremely boil it down, you would summarize into do your duty to the best of your abilities and do not be attached to the results. Now, in this second group of 6 chapters, where chapter 9 is found, it turns the Bhagavad Gita, the conversation of the Bhagavad Gita takes a turn in where Krishna now becomes very prominent and becomes more of a theistic, not that he wasn't a theistic text before, but now Krishna is really prominent. That's saying like, hey, I am everything, right? I create and pervade the entire universe, and he's right there in your face. And so this chapter 9 we have already covered statements by Krishna, such as, just like air in space is my position, meaning that he's as subtle as space, which we don't even notice space, right? Everything that exists within space. And so how subtle is that element, right? Like we can touch it, we can see it. We don't know exactly what to make out of it. And yet it is the I would say one of the top 3 most important attributes of material existence, because without space, where would we be? So it's so subtle, and yet it's so necessary, which creates enough, which highlights Krishna's power, in the sense that it is one of the most vital things for all of existence, without which nothing could exist, but yet is detached, is subtle. It doesn't impact anything. It doesn't pollute even air, like Krishna mentions in the early texts of this chapter. Air is kind of floating through space. We can have air that smells good, air that smells bad, yet space is there, is uncontaminated. Space itself is not going to smell bad or good, despite the presence of air smelling good or bad. And you, as a matter of fact, can take air out altogether and create a vacuum, and still space exists, right? So in that sense, Krishna is becoming so prominent. This, by the way, is also the basis of panentheism, where Krishna is so close, where his power, in this example, the power of space, is necessary for all things to exist, and yet it doesn't change anything, it doesn't force anything upon us, allowing us to still have free will. And as prominent as it is, the need for space, but then also so detached, where we can carry out our free will. So in that sense, it introduces so much theology. The basis of our theology is introduced here in this chapter. We would now start on text 12. But before we start on text 12, which is where we left off, what did you think about this context yourself, Kim?
Yeah, I love that you brought up that analogy again of the space and air and how Krishna pervades everything here on earth. When I was in college, I had a friend who told me that, oh, look at the blade of grass or the birds, that's all God, that's God. And me growing up in a Christian household, I could not wrap my head around like the plant as God, or this idea of pantheism. So you bringing up panentheism, it's a really distinctive feature, at least of our tradition. And so it really, like, we're putting all our cards on the table now with this chapter. So yeah, it was a really good summary. Thank you.
Exactly. What else do you think? Because, like myself and Varangi, who we've been missing for a while, you are also in all of these classes, and you also have this incredibly philosophical mind. What do you think about anything else that I may have left out in
Yeah,
general.
I think when you subscribe to the idea of everything coming from one source or some source being in control, it makes sense to me on many levels where we're actually not living in chaos. Krishna needs to have his hand in everything in order to make sure things just kind of run smoothly, so to speak. And so if you believe in an original source, believe in a concept of divinity that is omnipotent, all powerful, that that divinity, that deity, that source needs to pervade everything to some degree. Otherwise, we would actually live in chaos. So it makes sense to me, the idea of panentheism, that Krishna would, yes, be all pervading, not so much as to overtake our free will or anything like that, but also that Krishna is transcendent, above it all. Um, it seems like a very logical approach to theology.
I really like what you said. As I was listening to you, something else came to my mind, which is not necessarily about the context of the Gita where we stand and so on, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning also. You were discussing the need for Krishna to oversee things, otherwise things would deteriorate into chaos, but not so much that as to take our free will away. That to me has a huge implication, which is one of the top 3 questions of all time, which is, where do we come from? Where do we go from here? And what is the purpose of my life? To me, what I want to speak on is the purpose of our lives. So by listening to you, this idea of our lives having a purpose becomes quite prominent, because if Krishna pervades everything, which is to say, he doesn't allow us to deteriorate into chaos, which we probably would by exercising freely due to our free will, our greed, our hate, our anger, our lust, etc. Then he's still there with his hands on it to prevent that from happening. But at the same time, he doesn't take our free will away. That means there's something more. It's not just that. It's not that we are just here for the sake of being here so that Krishna can say, yes, I created it and I pervaded it. I pervade it all. And that's where it ends. It's like, no, there is a purpose. There's a reason why we are here. There is a reason why he did things in this way, that he would allow us to exercise free will. When can you say, why do we have free will to begin with? That would also imply, well, there must be a reason. And if there's a reason, there must be a purpose. Why would you have free will otherwise? And that he doesn't impact with that. He doesn't interfere with that. But at the same time, he's not too far away as to allow us to deteriorate so bad. Then what is the purpose of all that? That the perfect balance must have a purpose, must have a reason, which obviously I think is going to be a good segue into text 12 here, which those who are atheistic in their views disagree with all of this, right? We didn't come from anywhere. We came from matter. That's where we came from. We are stardust, right? That's all there is to it. And we don't go anywhere after this life. When you die, you're dead. And there's no purpose to your life. Your purpose is whatever you say it is. And when you die, you're done. So contrary to that, by listening to you, I was seeing in your words this obvious purpose, that this balance is too great to be an accident. The balance of, space being so subtle to allow you to exist, but not dictate how you exist, is Krishna's own analogy of his presence in the universe. And why would there be such a balance? Why would such a balance be necessary? Why would we be here with such a Yeah, I think I'm just repeating myself at this point. With such a perfect balance of free will and detachments, there must be something that we must be doing here, and that would be the purpose of our life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. Think of how many people in this world struggle with what is my purpose, or they're spinning around, running around on a gerbil wheel, just doing the same thing over and over again, and they're not getting fulfillment. And even the idea of one and done, you come into this life and, well, whatever happens, now you just fall back to dirt. If I believed that, it would give me I don't know, a sense of hopelessness, like a sense of, well, there aren't really any repercussions for what I do. I'm going to go rob a bank. I'm going to go get drunk all day. I'm going to go do whatever. It's like, what's the point? I'm just here for a very short amount of time. And it just seems like a very limiting worldview. And granted, I might be a little biased, but but yeah, I do like what you brought up. It's a really distinctive point about there is a purpose for everything. So
We don't have sufficient reason, and I think this is a term that I'm going to be bringing up here as we go into text 12. I don't have sufficient reason to believe that there isn't a purpose to my life, given the fact that any intelligent mechanism we can observe in the natural world has a purpose. We can say, what is the purpose of the oceans? Well, to cool off Earth, to absorb carbon dioxide so that the atmosphere doesn't overheat and we all burn, to keep things in the perfect cycle that we currently have. What is the purpose of a clock? Always to tell the time. What is the purpose of the car? Always to drive you from point A to point B. What is the purpose of you working out and being in shape? Oh, to have optimum health. What is the purpose of going to university? Well, to become somewhat of an expert on some subject so that I can provide value to society, so that in exchange, that society can give me money. What is the purpose of a relationship? Well, to exchange love, to love and be loved. So everything in our experience in the material world that has some kind of intelligence to it, an intelligent mechanism, has a purpose, that has a balance that is cyclical. There's a purpose. Like, why is it cyclical that the sun comes up during the day and goes down during the night? Well, is it just adaptation according to Darwin because we sleep better when it's dark? Well, could be that, but also the sun goes down so we can sleep well at night. That's the purpose of the sun going down. So any sufficiently balanced and intelligent mechanism, cycle, etc., that we are able to observe in the natural world has a purpose. So why is it that when it comes down to one of the most intricate objects that we can possibly observe in the material world, which is our own bodies, would have no purpose? I don't have sufficient reason to believe that. I don't have sufficient reason to believe that one of the most intricate objects of the universe, which is our own body and minds and consciousness, whatever that is, would have no purpose. Why would I believe that? If much simpler objects and cycles and mechanisms all have a purpose, why would such an intricate one not have any purpose? I don't have any reasons to believe that.
yeah. Yeah. And also, like, we can look at those who strive for the perfected state of material life, like the millionaires, the billionaires. It's still never enough. There's still something within them that they're still striving for. It doesn't bring them ultimate happiness or joy. And so this idea that everything in our life serves a purpose is, when you really think about it, it makes sense to me, because we're all striving for perfection. And, the idea that we can't meet these perfected standards, or that our love with another human being is just not quite enough and leaves us longing for more. Krishna, we talked about in many episodes before, where Krishna gives us our worship, or gives us our love, gives us our affection, even if it's for, say, a demigod, or even if it's for, say, a material relationship. It's all preparing us for that ultimate perfected love with Krishna. And maybe we're not going to be focused so much on that in this lifetime. And that's okay, because it all serves a purpose for those building blocks. Kind of like with the Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi was teaching him how to wash the car, but then ultimately it was for the competition. And so these experiences that we have of how to communicate, how to resolve conflict, how to love, how to be loved, it all prepares us for that ultimate relationship with a perfect lover.
You touch on something again, which I think is so powerful. I want to expand on it a little bit from how I heard. You mentioned the billionaires and millionaires, and that although they seemingly have everything that one could possibly want, still they're not happy. And I want to expand on that. It's not my own thing, is something that I heard our teacher Tukaram saying, and I want to bring it up here. The fact that this is true, what you said, that we have billionaires and millionaires, and many of them, let's say there are many, many millionaires, right? Billionaires are a little bit more scarce, but let's say there are many, many millionaires out there. The fact that they are not ultimately happy, and it's almost the contrary. The more money you have, it seems the more unhappy you are, because the more problems you have. That fact, plus the fact that we are beings possessed with desires, implicates at least that I am a non-material being, and that I am ultimately transcendental to all of this matter. Because if I have achieved the position of a millionaire and a billionaire, and still I cannot fulfill my desires, to me, that is sufficient reason to believe that my desires are ultimately to be fulfilled with something that is non-material and therefore spiritual. And therefore there is something after this life. There is something above and beyond this life. There is something that me, who I actually am, a spirit soul, am longing for, which is not found here. To me, that is sufficient reason to believe that life does continue. It doesn't end here, because otherwise I would be able to fulfill my desires in the material world once I achieve the status of a billionaire. What sense pleasure can I not fulfill if I have $1 billion in my bank accounts? And yet we don't find that to be true. People that are billionaires are still unhappy, are still unsatisfied, still do not have the sense of fulfillment. To me, that is sufficient reason to believe that we are not, therefore, material and something beyond.
Yeah, definitely. And, maybe scientists or certain skeptics who have that position may not accept what I'm about to say as a good reason for believing in the existence of God. But I like the idea of, what are we innately seeking? What is it in us that we're not satisfied with the state of our life in this world? What is it that just keeps us driving and striving for something that we just can't quite satisfy in this world? To me, that innate longing points to something in another world, points to another possibility that we kind of know. We have this instinct, we have this longing that we want to have that relationship with God again. We want to go to a place that's a little better than this, the struggles of this world, that we just kind of know there's something better. Otherwise, why would we be striving for it? Why wouldn't we just kind of accept things as they are and go about our lives?
Precisely. Yeah. So perhaps this is a good segue into text 12, where we start now from where we left off on the previous recording. Text 12 reads, "Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. I do believe that we should go back a few texts to get a better context here. Let's see. So Krishna says in text 8, the whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again. And under my will, it is annihilated at the end. Text 9, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. This material energy, this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rules, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. Now, text 12. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So what is Krishna conveying here? He's saying, hey, I'm it, right? I like this material, this whole cosmic order is under me. Like if anybody says that, that's the person, that's the supreme person, right? So just rest with that one point. The whole cosmic order is under me. Krishna is saying, I am the supreme person. But then some fools, when I come in the human form, they deride me. They can't understand me. They don't see me as the supreme Lord of all that be. And those people, thus bewildered, are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberations, their fruitive activities, and culture of knowledge are all defeated, which is where we are. So Krishna is now saying, if you don't believe me, if you hold an atheistic view, then your hopes for liberation, like that's a granted, right? Because if you are an atheistic person, you don't even believe that you are a soul entrapped in a body desiring liberation. Well, perhaps not knowingly desiring liberation, but like you mentioned, Kim, it points that there should be something else, another world to which I could be liberated into. So you're not even thinking that way. So then obviously that is defeated because you're not going to be liberated because you're not even wanting to. You're thinking that you're nothing but matter. And consciousness is just a bunch of chemical interactions in your brain. And therefore, yes, you're not going to get what you don't want. You're not even striving for it. So your hopes for liberation is defeated, certainly. The fruitive activities. How would such a person's fruitive activities be defeated? Like in the sense of hope, I believe, like you're saying, right? Like what is the hope for anything? If there isn't God, if it's one and done, if I live the life as I have now, and then when I'm done, when I die, I'm dead, then what is the hope for anything? Why should I act in any one given way? My fruitive activities, whether good or bad, has no moral impact. And who is then going to say what's good and what's bad? Why can't I just kill people and not feel guilty about it and descend into total chaos? It wouldn't matter. So our activities, they don't matter. They are defeated in that sense. But now, what I think is the most interesting in this text, that their culture of knowledge are defeated. What would that mean? Well, when you listen to a so-called atheist, skeptic, secular humanist, if you listen to them, they sound very wise. It sounds that what they're saying is much more reasonable than what religious people are saying, because it doesn't necessitate blind faith or dogmatic statements or absolute truth that can't be proven by empirical science. And I'm only going to believe that which I have sufficient reason to believe. So it really sounds seductive. It really sounds like, yeah, that's the way to live life. That would be the best way to organize society, and I should follow such a person. But such a person is, in that knowledge, is just so shallow, although seemingly deep, because you're saying deep things in a shallow, superficial arena. I would argue that, hey, if you truly believe that there isn't a God, then you have eliminated the original cause of all causes. Why? Well, because that's our description of God. God is the ultimate cause of all causes. And if there isn't the original source, the original cause of all causes, then we would be left within a universe that came from nothing. If we go back to our singularity, to the singularity that cosmology postulates, by their own scientific definition, the singularity, which was there prior to the Big Bang, is an infinitely dense point, inside of which the entire matter of the universe is to be found, which then exploded, creating space and time itself. And it has been expanding in space since that time. And now, if we work the clock backwards, then what is expanding, which is scientific, this is empirical science, cosmology, will say that the universe is expanding, is accepted as hardcore science. Well, philosophically, we can then revert the clock back, then the universe will be contracting. If it is now expanding, it will be contracting. We contract all the way back to that singularity again, compress everything again. The question would still remain, where does that come from? That single point that contains inside of it the matter of the entire universe, the power of the entire universe, where did that come from? The answer could only be A, it came from something else, or B, it came from nothing. And in fact, many of these so-called atheistic scientists or skeptics or secular humanists would actually postulate that it came from nothing. We have Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris on record saying that they can prove that the entire universe came from nothing. Well, I think that is not sufficient reason to believe in such an argument, since that there's nothing in our experience that would prove that something came from nothing. Everything we know came from something. I came from my mother and my father. The trees that I see outside came from a seed. Everything came from something that is natural. That's what we observe. But then now we're going to say that the whole of the universe came from nothing. I think that is the apologetic position. They have to defend that position. How is it possible that everything came from nothing? And so to me, it is sufficiently acceptable that that singular point is God's energy because it came from God. Otherwise, it came from nothing. And so such prominent scientists, atheists, secular humanists, skeptics, etc., sound good, talk about in-depth theoretical knowledge or scientific or philosophical knowledge, but that knowledge is just superficial. It's simultaneously deep and superficial. And in that sense, Krishna says their culture of knowledge are all defeated. What are your thoughts on this point, Kim?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to me when Tukaram Prabhu talks about the idea of faith, and he mentions that at some point, you first of all have to have a little bit of faith to even keep your foot in the door. You know, you come to a class or two, you keep coming. And then as you progress and you accept certain parts of a tradition or a text as being, okay, logical, it makes sense to me, it's something I can buy into, then at some point, perhaps a deeper level of faith comes in where, okay, now we're in chapter 9 and Krishna is now saying this. If I've accepted Krishna as the source of everything for a reason A, B, and C, then I look at this text and it's very easy for me to accept whatever else Krishna is saying, when we go deeper, when he starts getting into specifics of the universe. So just for me personally, that's kind of how logically I continue in my journey with this tradition, is like I've accepted a certain absolute for me, that Krishna is the source of everything. And so, oh, he's saying in this verse, he's talking about the atheists and being bewildered and having repeated birth and death because of this bewilderment or rejection of Krishna. I accept it as truth. It's, faith is going to be part of any religion, any religious philosophy. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to just, I don't want to deviate so much from our structure of the Gita, but I do like to make one more point, like why are we, since our podcast focuses on the Gita, why are we talking about atheistic people, secular humanists, etc.? What is the value within the context of studying the Gita? I just want to put a note to that in case somebody's wondering. So what you said is very scientific, knowingly or unknowingly, which is to say that, hey, I have reasons A, B, and C from prior chapters that I'm building on top of, and now I get to chapter 9, and Krishna makes this much bolder argument, but I believe it is still. Why? Because my foundation of arguments A, B, and C are still intact. Those premises, to me, they're still true. I have sufficient reason to still believe them. Well, this is very scientific in the sense that every scientist builds on top of the previous scientist. And it's like the premises that the previous scientists articulated and was accepted in the scientific community is the grounds on top of which other scientists now expands that. So we can go back to Newton, Isaac Newton, and then Albert Einstein, and so on. The scientists of today, they're building on their discoveries and their scientific facts, right? And so this is very relevant here because the point I just tried to make that, hey, let's go back to the Big Bang. If you want to go back to original premises, let's go all the way back there and let's analyze it. That singular point prior to the Big Bang, prior to space and time itself, where did that come from? And if I ask that sincerely, and if I meditate on that, if I contemplate that, I don't see anything else. I've thought about this for quite some time. I've read a lot of literature on it, and I don't see any other choices. That either A, it came from something that had all of that. That singular point, as infinitely dense as it may seem, as extraordinary, as wonderful, as bewildering it may seem, still it must have come from someplace. And that place from which it came would have to have that and more because it gave that, right? So it came from that place. Otherwise, if it didn't come from something, then where did it come from? I don't see any other reasonable answer but to say that it came from nothing, which is actually what atheistic scientists would say. It came from nothing. So if we go all the way back and we scrutinize that, those two possibilities, given that I don't have any sufficient reason to believe that things come from nothing, then my position is naturally that of a theist. And any persuasion of a defeated culture of knowledge of an atheistic view is defeated to begin with. And therefore, I should align my life and my lifestyle, I should engineer my lifestyle in a way that is congruent with the Almighty God, with the Supreme Person, and everything that he's saying from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3, because to not believe in that, then we have to go back to the Big Bang and say, okay, then you are accepting that everything came from nothing. And that I don't have sufficient reasons to believe in. So I think it's very important to keep this rather philosophical and theological premises in place so that we can allow them to help us navigate the world and understand that, okay, these are the principles that guides my life. This is who I am. I believe in X, Y, and Z, just like science science does. It builds on top of premises. I'm building my premises. I'm allowing that to guide my lifestyle. And I'm not going to deviate, because to deviate from that view, I have to go back to each one of these premises and come up with a better, more reasonable explanation for them. So I think it's quite important to study God, the Gita, Krishna, in these very extraordinary claims in the light of this philosophical context. You know, like, hey, there's a lot of things that we're building on top of here to get to this point. We are not accepting these things in blind faith. We do have sufficient reason to believe in everything there is, to accept Krishna saying, this entire material nature is under me. Like, we have sufficient, we've done the homework. We, like you said earlier, we put the cards on the table, we scrutinize them, and we now have created the basis for those beliefs, and we're not going to let go of it. And if somebody's trying to criticize them, saying that we accepted it as dogma, no, that may be the position of Western religions, not what we're talking about here. This is different, you know? And so I think that that's a pretty big side point that I'm making here, but I think is valuable nevertheless to allow us to know that this is just not a feeling. That's just not what I feel. That's not like my subjective experience in the world. And it gives me little bubbly feelings in my heart when I believe that there is a God, and that I have the psychological need to have hope that death, I don't cease to exist, and that I'm weak-minded like that, and that God is nothing but a contrast, a construct of my psychological mind that allows part of me to still exist. No, we're not going to accept any of that. We've done our homework. We went all the way back to the Big Bang and worked all the way up here. And now that we're here, accepting Krishna saying, everything is inside of me, I'm that from which everything came, we have sufficient reason to believe that. We're not just saying it, you know? And it is not just a good car sticker either, something that I can put like a sticker in my car and believe that for the next 7 weeks. And then, you know, I believe something else later. No, we're not changing our minds. We're not changing our position. There isn't sufficient reason to believe the contrary. And as far as I can tell, there's plenty sufficient reasons to believe in what Krishna is saying. Anyways.
Yeah, and I liked how earlier you were talking about the apologetic position, and well, who actually has the apologetic position? And so for someone who says, like you just mentioned, oh, you have some desire in your heart, some need, some irrational need to believe in God. Well, the counter, argument to that would be, well, you have a innate position construct in your heart to not believe in God. And so who has the apologetic position? And so all we can do is stand by our logic, show people the math. And what I love about this tradition, especially growing up in a Christian household, is that Tukaram Prabhu and any other spiritual teacher and leader at his level, they never shy away from questions. They love questions. They love doubt. They love discussion. It's not just one way, here, I'm just going to tell you the way it is. No questions allowed, no feedback allowed. It's, they encourage it. And so that to me says a lot about the integrity of the people, the disciples, the founders, the saints who have come in succession to establish where we are today.
Exactly, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let us move on. Text 13. Those who are not deluded. So now Krishna is talking about some other type of people, right? Because those who are bewildered, they are atheistic, demonic views, etc. Now Krishna is contrasting, saying those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So now that's us, right? As biased as that may sound, because obviously we want to be the great souls, right? We want to be protected by the divine nature. But also we are the ones saying that, yeah, everything came from something in the Big Bang, and that it is more reasonable to believe that than the contrary. So it's not just a biased, easy position to take, to say I'm the great one and you're not because you don't believe what I believe. It's like, no, yes, I believe that, but I also have sufficient scientific reason and philosophical reason to believe this. And Krishna is now talking on our behalf, saying those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature, which is something interesting here. It came up in class. We oftentimes speak about free will. And at least to me, when I was first wrestling with the idea of free will and try to grasp what does that mean, to me, it always implied ultimate and absolute free will, that I can literally do whatever I wish. When if we kind of get deeper into what Krishna is pointing to here, is quite the contrary. Our free will, although free, is free within a context. There are limitations. It's not absolute. For example, I cannot see as an ego can see. I have limitations, right? So Krishna prior to this text, he's saying this bewildered people are under my material nature, under my material nature. So that means that there's a sense in which material nature is controlling them. And it is obvious to see because you die. You believe that you're nothing but chemicals and that your entire consciousness is nothing but chemicals, then you are under the rule of that nature that produced the chemical, which you now say you are. And guess what? You die. And therefore you are under the control of that nature. But contrasting to that, Krishna is here saying in this text that the great souls, those that are not deluded, those that accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are under the protection of the divine nature, not the material nature, but the divine nature. And we are protected as such, which implies that we can go back to where this divine nature is, not here, right? That there's something more after life. But notice that either way, we are under Krishna's energy, whether we are bewildered and an atheist, or we are the great soul and liberated, still we are under Krishna's divine or material nature. And our free will mainly consists of us aligning with that truth and wanting to continue to pursue materialistic activities. And I don't say materialistic in a derogatory way. It could be a materialistic activities of what are those people called when you give back? You make so much money and then you give back. What are you being?
Benefactor or?
Yeah, philanthropy, exactly.
Oh, philanthropist.
Philanthropic, right? Like you philanthropy, right? You're giving back. So those are good deeds. You're helping the poor. Nevertheless, it is material, and you come back to reap the benefits of those good material actions. So I'm not being derogatory when I say material actions here. They are nevertheless material if Krishna isn't the center. But either way, you are under Krishna's energy, and your free will truly consists of engaging in material activities or spiritual activities, right? That's really all that our free will is about, since either way, we are under Krishna's energy. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on that, Kim.
Yeah, I like that you pointed out the protection aspect. That part didn't stand out to me at first, and I think that's a really important aspect about so often when, like, I counsel people, and so often it's so much of this idea of they weren't protected and the feeling that they're all alone in this world, and getting back to the idea of the perfect love and what a relationship with God would be like. I think that's a really important point.
Awesome. Okay, so then text 14, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So now Krishna is further elaborating on those that are not deluded, the great souls, etc., that are under the divine protection. What are they like? What do they do? They're always chanting. I like how Krishna says that as the first thing, right? Always chanting, because in our spiritual tradition, the most powerful of our spiritual practice is chanting. So powerful that we subcategorize that. There is our personal chanting. We call that japa. And we do that, the 16 rounds of our Maha Mantra. We do that in our own personal time. We're repeating, chanting Krishna's name to ourselves. And then we do kirtan, sankirtan, where we get together with everybody and we sing it out loud and we chant it together in our community of devotees. So it's so important, this idea of chanting, that we have two aspects, two categories of that. But nevertheless, that's what we are always doing. And it is true. Like we spend so much time chanting, like 2 hours just about in japa and then in kirtan. And then even in my mind, because, you know, you listen to such nice music, and music has this super powerful aspect that it penetrates your mind and it still repeats on your mind. So then in that sense, like, you're truly always chanting, whether I'm verbally saying it or chanting out loud with others, or if you just in my mind is going on, you know. So how do we act? What do we do? We are always chanting my glories, Krishna's glories. This is nothing but love. Like, I have children, and oftentimes I catch myself speaking of the glories of my children, how beautiful they are, how cute they are. Obviously, you know, from my biased and subjective perspective, and partial
These
perspective.
children are very cute. You are not exaggerating. I'm an unbiased third party, and I am saying I agree. They are the cutest children I've ever seen.
Well, thank you. That was very kind of you. But let's say from my inevitably subjective and partial and biased point of view, I'm chanting their glories because I love them. I'm talking about how cute they are, the little thing they did and so on. This is just natural. So if you are in love with God, who are infinitely more beautiful than my children, infinitely more amazing than my children, why wouldn't I always chant his glory? That's just natural. That's just love. That's the intricacies of love. So always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination. We were talking about this in one of the previous episodes. What would cause a man to die for a cause? It's love. You know, like, you're not gonna die for something that you hate. You die for something that you love. You know, like, what would cause a woman? And when I say a man here, I'm talking about, you know, Homo sapiens. What would cause a person to do anything that requires a great sacrifice and great determination? What would cause a person to go to war? Well, the love for their country. That's what it's advertised to us. You love your nation and you're going to go defend your nation. It's because you love it, you know? And so, yeah, and therefore you endeavor with great determination. And when you love something, you're going to endeavor with great determination for that something, because it's how you express that love. Mothers giving birth, you have to have a great determination to do that. In our current society, you are given a bunch of drugs. I personally think it's unfortunate. That's just my personal opinions. It's nothing to do with the Gita or Tukaram Prabhu. It's just my personal opinion. I think there's a great benefit to gain, not only for the mother, and also for the child, if you have a natural birth. The body of a woman is incredible. It can do it. The Egyptians did it for many times without epidurals. You know, the Romans did it. So women can do it. And there are many, many scientific benefits to that. Anyways, it is nevertheless a great determination to go through that, because it's very painful and it requires a great sacrifice. But you love your children and you do it for that reason, because you've looked into it. you realize what the benefits would be of a natural birth. And therefore you put yourself through that pain for the benefit of your children. And that requires great determination. So it's just nothing but love here. That's what we're talking about. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. Why? Well, because God is infinitely great and you are infinitely small. And if you bow down to Donald Trump, why would you not bow down to God, who is infinitely great and you are infinitely small? It's just natural. You recognize his greatness and you bow down to him. So these great souls, us, we are perpetually worshiping God with devotion. Why wouldn't we? We love him. So that's this text 14.
Yeah, and it's a very natural reaction to, like you were talking about with your children. When you love someone, you want to talk about them, worship them, laud them. Yeah.
And I think, Kim, for the sake of time, even though certainly I could certainly continue, and I know you could too, but I think we're getting out of time here. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of these verses that go up to, what do we go up to, 26 or 27 in class, I think they can be summed up as far as, so yeah.
Exactly. That's why I thought I saw the next verse that comes up, and I realized that not only we've been talking for a long time now, but they can actually be summed up, and in that way we can achieve our goal to get to text 27, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, 14, now 15, and why don't you read them, Kim? So let's see, 15, I think to 21.
15 through 21?
I think
okay.
so. Yeah.
Others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. I'm the father of this universe, the mother, the support, and the grandsire. I am the object of knowledge, the purifier and the syllable Om. I am also the rig, the sama, and the Yajurvedas. I am the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, and the most dear friend. I am the creation and the annihilation, the basis of everything, the resting place and the eternal seed. I give heat and I withhold and send forth the rain. I am immortality and I am also death personified. Both spirit and matter are in me. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it was so interesting in class with Tukaram Prabhu how he gave the cultural context behind this, because otherwise this would have just gone over my head. But the last few verses about going to the heavenly planets and then coming back down again was very sobering. It's like, oh, well, why are we bothering with the heavenly planets then? I would rather just go straight to Krishna's home.
Exactly. That because of karma, right? We can, again, this good material actions will give us good material reactions. This is the law of karma. But it ends. So we go all the way to the heavenly planet. We enjoy godly delights, but then it ends. Then it's like Monday again, right? You work all the way up to Friday, and here we are. Now it's Friday evening and Saturday, and then it's Sunday, and then it's Monday again. And then you do it all over again. So that's the picture that Krishna is painting here. And it's like, yeah, why can't we go to a place where it's always Friday and Saturday? Not even Sunday, because Sunday is too shadowed by Monday, right? Sunday evening. Just like that, like 4:30 on Friday, when you're almost done with work, and you know that you can go now, do whatever you want, and the next day, Saturday, is super cool, and you can also do whatever you want because you can wake up late on Sunday. But inevitably, it's going to be Monday again. So that's what Krishna is talking about here. So yeah, like an intelligent person would think, what should I do? How can I engage myself in a way that I live perpetually Friday evening and Saturday? You know, I think it's a great point here. And also something else that Krishna is doing is like he's acknowledging that there are other people that even worship him, but in a different way. And it is quite natural because he's everything. He is the ritual, the sacrifice, the offering, the ancestors, the fire, the butter, the offerings. He's everything, right? He's really trying to make that point. That's why we say that chapter 9 becomes so theistic, that Krishna is so prominent in the center. Without a doubt, he's saying, I'm the father and the mother. It's like he leaves no room for anything to exist that is not him. Both spirit and matter are in me, right? So he's in the center, but nevertheless, he's saying, hey, but people do worship me in these different ways, not just the great souls that are perpetually worshiping him with devotion. People are worshiping him in different ways as well. So right on text 22, right following the last text that you read, but those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. And then on 23, those who are devotees of other gods and worship them with faith actually worship only me, but they do so in the wrong way. Is Krishna being judgmental here? Is he saying, hey, I'm worshiping other gods? Is he the jealous God from the Old Testament? Is he just criticizing like you're worshiping in the wrong way? I think one could read it that way. It would be reasonable, fair enough. I read it in a different way. I read it that is like, hey, Krishna is telling me what I'm doing wrong. Why? For my benefits. Why? Because then I can love him forever and nothing will be better for me than that. Not even the billions of dollars that we were discussing earlier will satisfy me here in the material world. But if I can love Krishna perpetually and forever, I'm truly satisfied and happy. And Krishna is doing nothing but pointing out that my worship is being done wrong. And I appreciate that clarity in instruction. Look, you're doing this wrong. You already have the propensity to worship, but you're doing it wrong. Do it in this way and you'll be right. I appreciate that. I'm non-envious. I'm a student. I recognize knowledgeable teachers and I take lessons from them. And Krishna is the ultimate teacher and he's telling me what I'm doing wrong. That's my best friend, not he or her who just tells me how good I am or how great I have it or whatever, right? Like, yeah, those are superficial relationships. A good friend is he who tells you what you're doing wrong so you can get your act straight and you can stop your unnecessary suffering and you can embrace all the potential that you could be. But it requires somebody wise to tell you that what you're doing wrong. So I really like this text 23 here. And then 24, I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. To me, that is the answer to one of the top 3 questions of all times. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where do we go? And why are we here? That is the answer of why we are here. I am the only enjoyer, Krishna says, which means we are not. He is the only enjoyer. That means our constitutional, eternal position is to be the servants, his servants, to give him enjoyments. Why? Because he is the only enjoyer. And if I think I want to enjoy, that means I'm envious of him. That's precisely text 1 of this chapter. Krishna tells Arjuna, because you're not envious of me, I'm going to be your best friend. But if you're envious of me and if you want to enjoy as well, you're going to fall down. Why? Because I am the only enjoyer. Now, here comes the biggest secret of our entire movements. I'm making a bold statement here, because I've heard giants saying this, and now I'm saying that as well. I'm just repeating. The biggest, boldest statements of our Bhakti tradition here in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is that if you read Krishna saying, I'm the only enjoyer, and you become envious and you fall down, as Krishna is saying, that is a big mistake. Because Krishna, in his position as the ultimate enjoyer himself, and since he's the God, triple O God, he is omniscient, he knows everything, there was something that he was curious about, which was, what is the position of my devotees? What is it like to be like them? For example, Radha Rani, who is in our theology the top devotee, the devotee who is not trying to compete with Krishna and be the only enjoyer, but rather be the servants of God, be that devotee who gives pleasure to God. What is it like for her? Her name is Radharani. She's the female representation of God, right? So God was wondering, what is that like? To the extent that he wanted to taste that and feel what that is like. That is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our Gaudiya Vaishnavism. That is Krishna coming as his own devotee to experience what that is like. And in that position, there was more satisfaction. Krishna neglected, Krishna gave up his position as the only enjoyer. And he himself wanted to become the devotee, he who gives pleasure to God. And in that position, he had higher satisfaction than the enjoyer. Again, this is quite of a secret. I say secret because like it takes thinking of theology, it takes sincerity, it takes determination to sit with these topics and understand them. And a lot of people do not have the appetite to do that, and therefore it is a secret. So not many people know. And so I'm speaking about something very profound here. It's like one of the core of our theology. That is our potential to give Krishna pleasure by realizing that he's the only enjoyer. We can actually have more pleasure than God himself. I don't know if that's too much, but that's certainly where we're going with this. There's the Bhagavad Gita, as we have spoken, as we are going over here. There's the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is much larger literature. And then there's the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is, let's say the Bhagavad Gita is our bachelor's degree. The Srimad Bhagavatam is our master's degree. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita is our PhD. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the PhD studies is where these truths are truly elaborated on. So I'm definitely going ahead, but when I read this verse, I can't help but to state that. When Krishna says, I'm the only enjoyer, that is true. That is his position. He's the only enjoyer. And if we become envious of him, we fall down. That's why we're here. That's the answers to one of the biggest questions. Why are we here? We're here because we became envious of God's position of being the only enjoyer. But we don't have to. God can be the only enjoyer. It is fine. Because now if God is the only enjoyer and my position is to give him pleasure, guess what? I have an infinite object to love. And now I can love him. He's an infinite person. And the intensity of my love, if I am properly serve him, can be so high that God himself was curious as to what would that be like. And he wanted to understand what that would be like. So it is perfect that he's the only enjoyer, because in our position, we can actually experience love through him with such a high intensity that is even higher than what he is experiencing himself. That is one of the biggest contribution of Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
I had never heard it expressed that way. So yeah, thank you for drawing out that point of giving God that sort of love And the idea also that God is infinite, what you said, and what that could mean as far as God's love can grow. Krishna's love can grow as our love grows. And so that kind of blows my mind as well.
If we put ourselves in God's position, in Krishna's position, then he has unlimited number of tiny little souls, which is who we are, that he loves. That's his position. And all these tiny little souls, if we are sober, if we are in our original position, we are serving him, we are giving him pleasure. So what is his position? He's this infinite being who has all these tiny little souls like us serving him, and he's the only enjoyer. That position is taken. Let's accept that. But now flip it. Accept your position. You're not the enjoyer. You are the servants. Accept that. That's who we are as souls. And then look at him. That's an infinite person that you can love. So your experience of love, your position, your satisfaction, it doesn't grant envy. You don't need to be envious. It's perfect that he's the only enjoyer. You're the eternal servants. And in that position, you have an infinite person to love. And it's so great, that position, that even God, this is the intricacies of Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm definitely going ahead, but it is there. That's what that book is telling us. That's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is Krishna coming as Radharani because he was curious as to what was she feeling, because she was properly situated in her position as the servant. And he was wondering, well, she's having a better time than I am. I want to see what that is like. And so it is perfect that he's the only enjoyer. And it's perfect that we are the servants. And in our position as the servants, we have an infinite object of love. And we should just embrace that with all of our heart, perpetually. And there won't be any lack of satisfaction and love and enjoyment. In fact, there will be perhaps even more than what God is experiencing himself. That is a huge secret of our Gaudiya Vaishnavism Bhakti culture.
Yeah, that concept just, it's pretty overwhelming when you really think about it and let it sink in, like, oh.
That's why, people ask me sometimes, well, so you were born a Christian and then now you are Hindu, so you gave up being a Christian. And say, no, I now know what Christ was talking about, whereas before I didn't. Because when I heard Christ saying, I'd rather be a servant in the kingdom of God than a king in this planet, I'm like, no, I'd rather be a king here. I don't want to be a servant anywhere. If you give me the choices of being a king here and now, I'll take it. I don't want to go anywhere, be a servant. So I didn't understand. And I asked many times what that meant. And I was like, well, God works in mysterious ways. Those are the answers I got. But then now I'm understanding it. To be a servant is my natural position. And there's so much love there. And that's the position that I actually want. Even God was curious as to what that would be like. I don't think Barack Obama is thinking, well, what would it be like to be Tadeu Souza? I don't think he's thinking that way, because it's not such a great position. But Krishna was thinking, what would it be like to be like Radharani? Well, that's a great position then. And we should take that, embrace that. That's who we are. That's our potential. And then text 25, those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. I think that's just so, that's that part of that free will that we were discussing. That Krishna is everything. People will relate to him directly or indirectly. You have the free will to do so. You go to the heavenly planet, you come down, you go to Indra's planet, etc. You're doing it all. But when you focus on Krishna and your determination is towards Krishna and you accept your position as the servants of Krishna, you go to Krishna. That's just such a clear, reasonable system. Fair, it's moral, it's logical, it's reasonable. I have sufficient reason to believe in that system, And then we went to 27, right? So yeah, then 26, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit or water, I will accept it. What is Krishna saying here? A leaf, like this is anywhere. Just go outside and you find a leaf. Water, yeah, just open your faucet. There's water coming. A fruit, yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult to get a fruit, considering that we live in Southern California and you can get a fruit. And you offer to Krishna and he will accept it. What is it that you are offering? Is Krishna in need of a leaf? Are there no leaves in the spiritual world? Is Krishna thirsty? Is he asking, hey, I just ran a marathon and I'm thirsty. If you give me water, I accept it. Is that what Krishna is saying? No, he's the supreme person. He's not in need of any of that. What is it saying? What is the qualifier of all of these things here? It is love and devotion. If we offer the simplest of all things, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, these things are so simple. They all have that in common. They're simple. They're easily found in the world. Krishna is saying, I'm going to accept those things because we are offering with love and devotion. That is the trick. That's what Krishna is asking. He's asking, hey, give me whatever, but give me with love and devotion and I will accept it. That's our free will. What is the one thing that Krishna does not have? Our love. He has everything because he's the supreme person, but he gave us free will to do with our love whatever we want. So we can place it anywhere, but if we place it towards him, is the perfection of our life. It is the purpose of our life. There goes another big question answered here. What is the purpose of our life? To learn that we should give our love to Krishna in devotion. That's the purpose of our life. That's why we're here. If we do that, we attain, we're successful. And then the last verse, 27, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that as an offering to me. Because I'm the only enjoyer. And that is your natural position to do those things anyways. So do it in your best interest. Do it towards me, because then you come live with me and you'll be happy forever. Call it my psychological need to have such a being telling me that. I'm happy with that. Let it be. It could be my psychological need. I'll take my chances. Because if this God doesn't exist, when I die, I still live the best version of my possible life. But if this God exists and I neglected him my entire life, when I die, I will have been the biggest fool.
Yeah, it's an important point. Yeah, and I really loved Tukaram Prabhu's class, and all of his classes are online on Facebook. You can always rewatch them, or on his Instagram account, tukaram.das. And he did such a great job of really emphasizing the weight of that text of, if you just offer me with love, devotion, like a leaf, a flower, water, whatever it is, whatever you have. It was so weighty because Tukaram Prabhu was talking about the Vedic rituals and the culture of that time, of how elaborate these rituals were, and involving 1,000 animals, and you need to have money and access to resources, and you need to do things this way and that way. And
geometrically speaking, these arenas that were built with these thousands of animals had to have such a precise geometrical build that is incredible. But please continue.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that. It doesn't surprise me.
In fact, geometry, you know, like you can go back to ancient Greeks and so on, and like, where does geometry come from? But even prior to that, in our Vedic texts, where these sacrificial arenas are being described, there is a tremendous amount of geometry that is described there, because they had to be built precisely to those parameters. It is all described there. And yes, but please continue.
Wow. Well, that hits home this point even more, of Krishna's now just kind of crumbling that house of cards and saying, hey, what actually is right, what is meaningful to me is when you just simply take whatever you have, whatever you do, whatever you're eating, and just offering it to me. It just flies in the face of the Vedic culture at the time. So
yes.
Yeah.
So I have sufficient reasons to believe in this God, in Krishna.
I do as well.
Not the God that will send me to hell forever for a thought crime, but to this God that says, hey, just give me your love and come live with me, and we will dance together. That God, yeah, that's my God. That's he from whom everything comes from.
And he's so accessible. Like you don't have to be
Yeah.
wealthy. You don't have to go through a priest or a pujari. You can do this at home. You can do this on your own. So accessible.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we went a little bit over, but that's okay. We had a couple weeks to catch up on, but thank you so much for this discussion. And for anyone tuning in, you can catch Tukaram live every Friday night at around 7:30 or 8 p.m. So hope to see you online. All right. Thank you, Tadeo.
Thank you, Kim. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll see you next week.
See ya.